In this video, I'll focus on photographer Eugene Richards and his work. He was born in 1944 in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and is now 78 years old. He's produced 16 photo books, been a member of Magnum and Seven Agency, and his work has been published in magazines like Life and National Geographic. In recent decades, assignments have dried up, but his work received some recognition when he was given a retrospective of 146 photographs at the George Eastman Museum in Rochester. The exhibition took place in 2017, and this was followed by an exhibition at the Arc of Photojournalism in Paris and a major retrospective in Perpignan in 2022. I recently released a video looking at the demise of photojournalism, and Richards is one of the casualties of this development. I'll place a link to the video in the description below. Richards is one of the photographers who produced some of the most memorable work in this genre. When you look at his photographs, you become immediately aware of his skill and the dedication that must have gone into producing such consistently powerful images. There are other photographers with this skill set, but few have the additional capacity for instilling their photographs with a deep sense of empathy. The sad result of the demise of photojournalism is that in the future, photographers like Richards will probably not find a vehicle to develop their voice. His unique vision is tied to who he is as a person, his upbringing, and his influences. He grew up in a working-class household. His father was a shipyard worker and his mother cleaned houses. At the age of 16, his mom gave him the money to buy his first camera, an Exacta. He described it as a beautiful thing. At the time, he was working a summer job painting construction barrels, and he would slip off into the woods with his camera and take pictures. He described it like being in nirvana, truly magical. He said the following: "It was enjoyable and spiritual to look at things I would never have looked at if I didn't have a camera. That opened the door for me and gave me a way out." During the 1960s, at the height of the Vietnam War, Richards cut up his draft card and sent it in. Instead of jailing him, the government invited him to join VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. The program sends volunteers to economically depressed parts of the US to help people improve their lives. So basically he became a social worker. Later, after receiving a BA, he enrolled in a graduate course at MIT that was supervised by the well-known photographer Minor White. White saw talent in Richards and pushed him to find his own vision. Richards said, "So whatever I was starting to emerge." So often when I look at the lives of really great photographers, I find that somewhere down the line their lives have been in some way influenced by a significant relationship, often another photographer. Through inspiration and mentorship, the baton of creativity gets passed on to a new generation. In my photographic career, I was extremely lucky to have David Goldblatt as a friend and mentor. It isn't necessarily the big things that make the difference. It's usually just a nudge or a statement that helps one steady one's path. Richard said that White was really firm about slowing down in life in general, and this meditative practice is exactly the skill that allows photographers to think calmly and in a focused manner even when externally things are chaotic. While Richards' wife, Dorothy Lynch, earned the money, he honed his craft and looked for outlets for his work. Dorothy unfortunately got breast cancer, and she decided to write about her battle with the disease. She asked Eugene to photograph the process, and initially he refused. Following her death in 1983, Richards published the book Exploding into Life, a document in her words and his pictures. His photographs are filled with hope and loss. The publication became controversial, and he received criticism for exposing a woman's health issue as a man. The title of the book, Exploding into Life, reflects a consciousness of being that emanated from Dorothy's heightened awareness of her own mortality. I remember at the time when Richards published this work, I was critical of his motives, and my knee-jerk reaction was that it was exploitative. But as Bob Dylan said, "But I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now." Richards' work became more focused and his involvement with his subjects became absolute. He admits to having obsessions with particular stories and the people involved. He manages to create work that is unflinching, but at the same time poetic. He isn't photographing as an observer, he's extracting the texture of his subject's lived experience. In this way, he manages to draw audiences into the realities of human existence, illuminating aspects that are seldom visible in the rush of life. One of his strongest bodies of work was his exploration of the drug world. The photographs would be eventually collated into a book called Cocaine True, Cocaine Blue. It was at this point that our photographic lives briefly touched sides. In the 80s, my first photographic essay was about a conscientious objector in apartheid South Africa. Life magazine bought the American rights to the story, and I was so excited that I spent the money on a flight to New York to speak to the picture editor, Peter Howe. I weirdly thought that if I somehow got to chat to him, I would increase my chances of the essay being published. In my hurry, I forgot to take enough money for accommodation, so I landed up staying in a flop house on 42nd Street. Eugene Richards' work on drugs knocked my essay out of the final edit, so I never became a life photographer. His essay was enormously powerful, and you can feel in the pictures the brief pleasures and enormous pain experienced by the addicts and their families. I'll briefly show another two of his books from my collection. In Stepping Through the Ashes, Richards records the aftermath of the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers. The book starts with images from Ground Zero and then expands to include the wider impact of the event. This is a fantastic book. Americans We is in some ways a best of selection from his years on the road traveling and working. He dedicated the book to his second wife Janine as well as Robert Frank. Richards tends to work up close to his subjects using wide-angle lenses. He avoids what he calls the iconic image, where everything is settled and final in one frame. Rather, his images weave a complex and often discordant path, which probably better reflects the true nature of life itself. It's usually unformed and transitory. Richard speaks his mind and has often taken flack for his forthrightness. He has berated the art world for shunning documentary photography, while it at the same time embraces frivolous clickbait. He sees a shift in photojournalism. Magazines now hire photographers to illustrate a point of view rather than for their skill, curiosity, and insight. He bemoans the fact that photographers are now told to stay in their lane. As a white male photographer, he can no longer tell stories about women or black people. He wrote the following, which I think sums up a lot of his feelings. The life and work of Eugene Richards highlights what is essential in any art form: a commitment to an idea and the ability to convey the reality of what he sees. Through his 45 years of working as a photojournalist, Richards has remained a humanist, and through his lyrical images, he's continued to advocate for others. I'm sure that some of you listening will probably appreciate Eugene Richards' work as much as I do. I hope you gained some insights from this video, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.